Significant progress has been made to reduce child hunger and caregiver depression since COVID-19, but there's still worrying numbers we have to unpack. 60% of children still have financial risks and face hostile and violent behaviour at home. That's according to a study by the Centre for Social Development in Africa. It looked at 123 grade R to grade 3 pupils from the beginning of the pandemic until the end. So what has this told us? Let's find out. I'm joined by lead researcher, Professor Leila Patel, joining us from the UJ Centre for Social Development. Prof, good to have you with us on ENCA. Appreciate the time. So when we talk about these issues, there's two that stand out here. For me, the reduction of child hunger. The other is caregiver depression. Let's start with the child hunger first. Just how bad was it during COVID and how much has it recovered? Good morning.
Good morning. During COVID, we assessed children, that was in 2020, who went to bed hungry in the last 7 days. And that was about 30%. And that declined by 2022 because of interventions that we made. And also just the whole situation opening up and lockdown becoming a little bit less constrained. And we see then that hunger drops completely to zero. And then by 2022, it goes up again to 5%. So, there have been gains there. But of course, we have to look at that in the context of the economic hardships that these households and families face. Turning to your question about,
the caregiver depression, I was going to ask you on that one. So what exactly, how do you measure caregiver depression? I think before you give me the numbers, Prof.
So we use a validated depression scale that is validated for use in South Africa, and it's pretty widely used. So we use it over 3 years, and it's also been used in other studies. And there we see very high numbers of caregiver depression in 2020, down around 45%. And then that drops gradually. And at the moment, it was in 2022, it was about 23%. But it's still very, very high if we think that, the mental well-being of a caregiver certainly has a huge impact on the well-being of the child. Globally, 5% of people suffer from depression. So that is an enormous concern.
Yeah, it is. If you look at the international 5% versus us here in South Africa, what do you think has made it worse since COVID? Because if we're talking about the numbers during COVID, you could understand the caregiver depression, being stuck at home, uncertainty around jobs, you having to look after a little one and educate them as well. Why has it gotten worse post-COVID, do you think?
Well, there's certain indicators we did better on, and I'd like to tell you about that because I think we often also always just focus on the negatives. So I'd like to come to that. But across the 3 waves, and it's a matched sample, so we're looking at the same children 3 times, and at the same time of each year. And we see very high numbers of unemployment, indebtedness in households, and families not having, caregivers not having enough money to buy food. So that number didn't change, and it actually got worse by 2022. And obviously it's related to the economy, and all the crisis that we're experiencing globally, economic crisis, but also our own institutional and governance failures, as the previous speaker highlighted too.
When we talk about the social development of this, it's little ones, it's grade R's to grade 3s. These are small little human beings relying on adults to see them through the world, and already they're having to deal with a caregiver who could have been depressed and child hunger. It's not exactly setting them up for success down the road as far as education is concerned. They should be worrying about playing outside, learning to ride bicycles, etc., not worrying about where their next meal is coming from. From a social development perspective, this must be devastating.
Absolutely. So when we speak of child well-being, we speak of the material well-being, that's the financial setup in which they're growing up. We look at their access to services like water and sanitation and so on. And then the access to health services, and at the school, their access to other educational support services. So all of this is a huge impact on their development. If they don't have enough food, they can't learn. And we see a lot of behavioral problems in the children. Although they improve, their social and emotional well-being improved, their peer relations improved, but conduct difficulties, a quarter of the children continue to experience conduct difficulties. So investments in the early years, very important to break these intergenerational cycles of disadvantage, because they accumulate over time. And then this impacts on their learning and their, productivity in later life, and their general health and well-being.
Yeah, if they end up, it's almost on this very sad hamster wheel. It sets them up for failure. That means when they get to adulthood and they're not earning the money that they need to be earning to support their family, their little ones end up in the same situation. It's a terrible cycle. I'm curious though, Prof, as I say goodbye to you, who is going to use this information? Or what do we do with this, as a society, and those who need to change this, put better systems into place? Who does what with this information?
Yeah. So the Department of Education, the National Department of Education, and provincial departments have a care and support unit, and that's guided by the National Schools, the Integrated School Health Program of 2012. But what we see is that the schools don't have these support units in place. And they're supposed to work across the health, welfare, and education sectors. There are no school social workers. So given all of the challenges, the social, emotional, and related challenges that children and their families face, including violence, not in the home, excuse me, but in the community, has a huge impact on their fearfulness, their anxiety, and so on. So those structures have to work better. We are working with Gauteng Department of Education, where we're learning about how to do this. And we're making this information also available to the National Department of Education. We hope Treasury will also listen to what we have to say.
Yeah, it's terrifying that it's actually gotten worse since COVID. And Prof, it's always lovely to talk to you. Professor Leila Patel, Centre for Social Development in Africa, to you as well. I mean, when you start talking about little ones, and you can see it there on screen, facing hostility in the community, facing violence at home, and these are little ones, grade R to grade 3. There's no reason in the world at all for such youngsters to be going through this kind of violence. And luckily, at least, the study is going somewhere. We'll follow up with the Department of Education, see what they're doing with this information.